All right. Hey there, everyone. This is Yashash and Siddharth on this side. We're trying to we try to take you over a sweet deck that we have created about our analysis of the startup market in India. Going on. Well, right off the bat, there are some interesting observations that we want to share with you so that you are enticed throughout the presentation. Something that we found out that the fundings in India, they actually follow a power law in the basis of regions. We talk about that and we'll actually look at the graph too. The cool implication could be that if the first data point goes up, the second data point will also go up and we can almost predict the growth. We'll talk about that later as well. Now, the cool thing that I found out that EVs were funded more in Uttar Pradesh than in Karnataka. Hmm. For anyone who is an Indian, you know Uttar Pradesh is more populous than Karnataka, but Karnataka is the IT hub for the country. Still, Uttar Pradesh wins on this. Next is financial services gathers more funding than software services in our country. It's basically like financial services, then fintech, then edtech, and then IT. The next point that I wanted to bring forward to you is a lot of startups in India get funded during April, which aligns with the financial cycles in India, which are spread from March to March. It's as if as soon as the budget is set for the new financial year, the companies actually or the VCs make a race to get to the market and fund the best startups out there. Now. Obviously, you're here to be a great entrepreneur, and that is why you're watching this video. So go on, pick those hats up, those entrepreneur hats up as we go on and ask a few questions that's something that you might think you want an answer to. First things first. You want to increase the chances of getting your startup funded depending upon where your headquarters is. Can you do that? And can you up your chances of getting funded in the same case? Well, data suggests that actually you can. Remember, we were talking about a power law? We can actually see that Karnataka, Maharashtra, and Haryana, they attract the most amount of funding, so much so that Karnataka basically attracts almost 50% of the funding that is distributed in the country. That's insane. You know where to be if you're a financial service or a tech service, but that will come later. The next thing I would want to show you is imagine you are a fintech guy or a financial services person. It kind of mimics the same. This graph mimics the same for both of those. You'll see we are heavily funded in Karnataka and Maharashtra and then sparsely funded across the other states. But if you're an electrical vehicle company, you'll see Uttar Pradesh overshoots the next competitor, which is Karnataka, by a lot. Now, the second question that you might have is wait. I am a startup owner. My startup's going to be $1 billion very soon. In Series C, let's say, for example, how much money should I expect? Can a VC lowball you into a cheaper deal? Can you negotiate better given data? Well, actually, you can. We see that a huge amount of funding is driven into financial services, and it again kind of follows a power law. But you will also see that it drops very quickly from financial services and so on and so forth. The meaty bit, though, is you can actually use our tool to go into per series dependent graph representation. In effect, you can actually see what happens in CVC across different sectors and how they react um, to a specific series. In itself, you will see because you're a financial services person, you can go from very low sectors, if you can see, which we'll dive into deeper next slide, to very large sectors as well. Now, what are these sectors? Remember, you can filter this again to the specific sector that you are in. And because you're in financial services, you obviously will do that. You will see that the biggest funding is for a $300 million funding, which was taken out by CoinSwitch Kuber, and the smallest funding was for $30 million. You can hover on our tool and find out exactly what you want for your specific need case. Now, passing the virtual stage on to Siddharth.
Thanks. So now, as an entrepreneur, your new goal is to try to de determine the right time to seek funding in your respective sector. And so in this case, the question that you're trying to answer is, what are the best months that typically receive the highest amount of funding? So shown here from our analysis, here's a graph which shows the average amount of funding which has been given by investors per month. And so from this graph, it's a pretty general graph that covers all sectors. However, but across all sectors, April seems to be a pretty good month in order to acquire funding from all investors. And the way in which we came to this conclusion is that during the month of April, we see that there are multiple peaks, and we even see one peak at $1.9 billion. And this was a pretty interesting observation from our end. Going forward, we can also break this analysis down into sectors. For example, if we take the automotive sector, it is implied that the best months to acquire funding will be in April and in September, due to the two peaks that we see on the graph. However, if you are an entrepreneur who is interested in the logistics and the supply chain sector, the best months to acquire funding during that time would be in January, April, or October. And this is also evident in the peaks that are seen from that graph as well. Now it's time to change gears, and so even though it's been fun being an entrepreneur, it's now time to put yourself in the shoes of an investor. And so, as an investor in this case, your new goal is to invest in small startup companies. And at this point, you are interested to know what kind of sectors receive multiple rounds of funding. One of the reasons why this is important is because more funding leads to better exits and increased profits. So shown here from our analysis, we were able to generate graphs which shows the aggregate totals for each funding round. Now, the proper way to read this graphs is, for example, if you go to the financial service sector, we see that there are a total of 12 rounds of funding. And the proper way to read the graphs is for each graph to read from left to right. So for financial services, we see that that many companies in this sector have received pre-seed, seed, and thereby going up towards Series A, Series B, Series C, and ultimately it culminates in Series F and debt funding. And one of the reasons why this is important is because it implies that the financial service sector is very important and very popular, and therefore companies that are in the space tend to receive more funding from investors. It's a pretty similar case for the food and beverage sector as well. However, if you consider the sector of aviation and aerospace, we see that it only has two rounds of funding, and therefore it is not a popular investment amongst investors. And so going forward, during the process in which we did our whole analysis, there were some certain limitations that we have faced. For example, from our data, there were multiple funding series, including Series J and Series S, which were present in our raw data. But ultimately, we had to filter them out based on in order to generate more simple and appropriate graphs. Furthermore, from our data preprocessing, we had to combine sectors to the best of our knowledge in the event of missing or incomplete data. Furthermore, we also aggregated regions and states from multiple cities in the same states. And for any missing data that we had in our data set, we labeled them as unknown rather than treat them as known, so that we would be able to preserve records in our data set and not lose key data. Furthermore, from our analysis, we show that we were able to do some sort of time series analysis or time series forecasting. However, it is key to note that the data that we considered was only from January of 2021 to May of 2022, and therefore it's not enough in order to draw any seasonal or cyclic implications. And lastly, we are not financial experts, so we cannot be considered as advisors. Therefore, our recommendations should be interpreted as learn. It should not be interpreted as learn advice. So please take caution. And finally, there were many recommendations for the study that could be applied for both entrepreneurs and investors. For entrepreneurs, for them, it's critical that they move to cities, move to states, including Karnataka, Maharashtra, and Haryana. And they should move to the states because those are prime spots to relocate to in order to get funding. Also, from our analysis, we were able to show that April is a pretty good month. It's actually a great month for companies to acquire funding. However, from our analysis, we see that different sectors perform well during different time periods of the year. And now, switching to the perspective of an investor, many investors are confident about the direction of the financial services sector currently, which is evidenced by the multiple rounds of funding that has been provided to entrepreneurs in this year and in 2021. Um, However, it's also usually the case that certain sectors perform better than others due to different locations, and therefore it is recommended for investors to stay in the state of um, Karnataka as it'll benefit them greatly. And so, yeah, that concludes our presentation. Thanks so much for tuning in.